Jose, Roberto from Sfera Legal. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you,
Very
Rich.
good. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for hopping on the call today. Hopefully the internet holds up. Here in Nosara, it's been going in and out. But while I have you on the line, I was going to see if you could help us kind of understand what's going on with employers, employees. I know there's been some residency stuff going on with borders being closed, just all this stuff. Can you quickly get us up to speed with what's going on these days?
Sure. Rich, thank you for having us. I mean, I know that it's complicated times for everybody, and we wanted to help out by at least putting out some information that might help, everyday people, business owners, and this is something that is affecting everybody, and it will affect us for many, many months to come, not only from a health perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Okay, so I think that's the focus that you wanted us to have on this call and go through that stuff. Obviously, at our office, the most questions that we are having is from a business perspective, especially since with the closing of the borders and with the government asking people to follow isolation guidelines, businesses have been hit extremely hard. Okay, and when I say businesses, we're not talking about huge hotel or a huge restaurant chain. Is for any kind of business. It's been pretty big hard. So it's important to bear that in mind, and that all of those businesses generate jobs for the community and income. So among all of the things that are going on, the government has been very proactive into passing certain laws and certain changes that will allow a little bit of more cash flow to companies and to businesses, in order to be able to especially not close down and not perform a lot of firings from their employees. Okay, so I wanted my part to focus on the labor changes that have been going on. And there are two things, very important things that were approved. Okay, that the government approved a law that basically allows business owners that while the national emergency is in place, they can on the work shifts and consequently on the workers' payment. Okay, that was taken as a measure so that business owners will not need to fire their employees or shut down their businesses. Okay, so very easily speaking, if a business owner, obviously there needs to be a procedure and file some documents, but if a business owner is able to demonstrate that in difference to last month, they generated 20% less income, basically they can request for the deduction of those working hours for their staff of at least 50% of the working hours. Okay, so as an example, if you had a worker that will work 8 hours per day, you can basically ask him to come in only 4 hours per day and pay him proportionally to what he's working.
Okay, so 50% decrease in pay and 50% decrease in time proportionately. That's
Correct.
one of the options. Okay.
Correct. Within the law also, if your business has been hit so hard, like most of the tourism sector is having at this moment, they can deduct that even the working hours to 75%. Okay, for that you need to demonstrate through a sworn statement or a CPA certification that during the same period of time, 1 year before, right now, your income has decreased at least 60%. Okay, so if you can demonstrate 20%, you can cut down up to 50. You can demonstrate 60% as in comparison to last year at the same time, you can cut them down to 75.
Okay, so from the employer side, this is this is a challenging situation because the employers obviously aren't making any money right now, but you also don't want to clear out your employees, so it's a tough situation.
That is correct. There are businesses that that continue to operate, and they still have some customers coming in. But for example, if you have a hotel that that relies on foreigners coming in with the borders closed, basically you have zero occupancy right now. So you need to lower down your expenses. Then the other possibility is, which actually was always contemplated in the labor code of Costa Rica, but then now was waived certain requirements that will make it a little bit quicker, is that while the emergency is in place, the government is allowing employers to suspend labor agreements, okay? So that would basically mean that for a certain period of time, while the situation is in place, you can actually suspend labor agreements, and that means that no wages need to be paid, and obviously no work needs to be done by the employees. Okay, the bad part about it is that obviously, the employees will not have a salary during that specific period of time. Okay, so
gotcha. So for that option, they get to keep their space with their company, but they're not receiving payment, but they're not being fired per se. They're just
that is
on
correct.
Hiatus.
And exactly. And when the situation ends, then the work agreement is back in place with all the same benefits that the person had before.
This is all very different. This is all very different than normal Costa Rica regulations and rulings.
It is, it's to us, it's been very interesting watching how the government has actually worked pretty hard for a lot of things to happen that obviously if this wasn't happening, they would have never even been into discussion in Costa Rica. Okay. And the last thing is that we have recommended that obviously it depends a lot on the cash flow capacity of the business owner to try and mix certain options. So for example, in some cases we have recommended, okay, you can suspend partially your payroll because you don't need to suspend all labor agreements. You can do that partially. Okay, so you can suspend certain part of it, and then on the other ones you can reduce the working hours. Okay, or for example, you can suspend the labor agreements, but if your cash flow allows you to, why don't you give a payment or some money to the employees so they can hold on during these months, and then we can credit it toward or even some Christmas bonus, okay? So that at least the employee has some money to spend during these difficult times, and at the same time you can credit it towards something else in the future. Okay, so I urge people to contact their attorneys and their accountants to see exactly how their cash flow is and see what will work, because I really think that what's very important also is to help the employees as much as possible, because at the end of the day they are the ones that are going to help circle the economy back, and if they don't have any money to spend in groceries and in other stuff, then the bouncing back for the economy is going to be extremely difficult.
All makes sense. Wow. I mean, everything's interrelated because you got to keep the employers going so that they can bring the people back. But if you have people earning full salaries right now and you're not making any money, you're going out of business. So it's a really challenging situation on every side.
Yes, that is correct. And that's why we also wanted to talk a little bit about certain measures that the government has taken into being a little bit more flexible with business owners. And I think Roberto is going to talk a little bit about that. Just prior to Roberto jumping in, I know that there are a lot of questions about lease payments. Okay. Right now, it's very important to know that it hasn't been approved, but there's already a bill in Congress that basically wants to set a moratorium for lease payments, both residential and commercial. Okay. I reviewed the bill. I don't think it's going to get passed like it is. I think there are going to be some changes made to the bill, to the project. But I do think that probably in the next week, we're going to see something coming out of Congress regarding lease payments, because basically this is something that is affecting the whole country. So I'm going to
Okay.
let Roberto jump in with some things related to some breaks that the government is doing regarding taxes.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Jose. So as you guys were mentioning, the biggest challenge now, not only in Costa Rica, but everywhere else in the world, is basically keeping cash in people's pockets so that the economy can continue moving to some extent, but also so that people can continue to buy their essentials, groceries, cleaning products, everything that they need just to weather this crisis. In other parts of the world, I mean, Europe and what's being also analyzed in the US Congress, countries that have money can send cash directly to the people that need it so that they achieve that goal. Costa Rica, unfortunately, doesn't have that capacity. So what we're working on, or the government is working on, is where can we give some breaks to the Costa Rican people and everyone that needs it, so that they still have some cash to cover their basic needs. So two important lines of actions that have been brought forward in this crisis are concerning banks and taxes. Because people need to pay taxes and need to pay, or most of them need to pay credit cards, they need to pay mortgages, they need to pay their credits that they normally use to keep going their business or their normal consumption. So on that first line, the banks, Costa Rica has a number of government-owned banks. In Osara, for example, you have a Bank of Costa Rica, which is where a lot of people bank. And those banks can adhere to instructions given by the government. So for them, the government has issued some basic instructions to be lenient with their credits. So in general terms, that has consisted basically, if someone requested to try to extend the term of the credit or the loan or the mortgage that they have, so that they have more time to pay and they can then lower the monthly installment that they need to pay to lower that burden. They've also instructed banks to waive 2 to 3 months of monthly installments and accumulate that to the principal balance owed. The key
Wow.
thing
So Roberto, can I just stop real quick? Did you say that, like, is that enacted or is that just being suggested right now?
that was instructed to the government-owned banks, and they are establishing that. Some banks have decided to do that automatically. It needs that type of assistance to go to the bank, knock on the door, and see of all these measures that they now have available, which they can implement. That instruction is for the Costa Rican banks, but what we have seen is that private banks have also followed suit. So a lot of the Costa Rican private banks that are not obligated to adhere to this instruction or this order from the government have also communicated that they will take different extent of measures. Some have stayed with what the government has suggested. Others have gone way beyond and basically say, if you don't need to pay the credit card for the next 3 months, come tell us and we'll find a solution for you and work with you to, find a way to carry forward this burden. So in this specific sense, what's important is that you go talk to your banker, see what your bank is doing, what sort of options they have on the table, and ask basically for what you need. I mean, we've seen banks go way and beyond of what we had expected, basically with the same comment that you were saying with regards to laws being more flexible than what it's usual for Costa Rica. Banks are also reacting very well and trying to keep businesses going and their own personal credit lines going as well. That basically through credit cards, the last one, but also for business owners so that they can, to some extent, use that loan or credit to probably enact some of the flexibility in their labor situations. And as you said, if they don't have cash coming in from consumers, they could at least use the credits to reduce their payroll instead of having to fire everyone. So that's concerning banks. With regards to taxes, which is one of the other things that normally takes cash out of your pocket, what the government has said is, or the way income tax in Costa Rica normally works is you have 4 annual installments that you have to do on a quarterly basis, and then you reach the end of the fiscal year and you pay whatever's left. So for now, they've said the second installment that it's covering from April to July, you don't have to pay that. I mean, we don't expect you to pay that. So that'll at least, that cash that the businesses and independent workers had allocated to pay for those taxes will remain in their accounts, and they can use it for to cover their expenses, keep the business going to some extent, whatnot.
And you will need to pay that. You will need to pay that in December 2020.
Okay, so it's just going in arrears, similar to the loan suggestions.
Correct.
Correct, because that it is an advance payment that is normally made towards that final payment of taxes. So what they're saying is we're not going to require you to make any advance payments for the next quarter. That could be extended if the situation does not improve. I mean, it's one of the options that's on the table. Then the other direct measure that has been enacted, and this one goes as well, particularly to businesses, is that for commercial leases, the VAT tax will be exempt for April, May, and June. So again, that's another payment that the businesses are normally required to do, that because it's going to be exempt for the next three months, the cash is going to remain with them, and it can help contribute to the payments within this crisis.
Rich, one thing that regarding banks, we are telling people, business owners, individuals who might not be able to pay their credit cards because, their salaries are going to be cut, or, their income is going to come down, not to wait for the government to do something. Contact the bank right now, okay? This week, we have been all days on the phone with banks, negotiating things for clients and for businesses. And they have been extremely helpful and flexible, okay? So I urge people to contact their bank, whoever their contact at their bank right now, and not wait, okay?
Okay.
The banks are prepared for this. They are working hard, and to be honest with you, I've had a very, very positive response from most of the banks I talked to during the last couple of weeks.
Wow, there's a lot of surprising information on this phone call.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I told you, that, there's some positive.
Strange times, though.
Yeah, there's some positive in all of the negative things that are going around,
Well, hey, before our internet signal goes out, are there any predictor 3 that you'd like to get out there or prepare people for?
Well, to be honest, I saw the podcast that you made yesterday with Dr. Alejandro. The biggest thing is regarding, the restrictions on mobility that are taking place right now from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. From a legal perspective, and I don't think that we're going to see a full lockdown of the country. Not only because the health ministry has said that it's not needed, but also because from a legal perspective, that will be very, very unlikely to happen, because the way our laws are written at this moment will not allow it, okay? So there will need to be a huge change in Costa Rican law for that to happen. And from the signs that the government authorities have said, at the end of the day, that's not what they want. A full lockdown of the country is not something that we should expect. I think we should continue to expect things moving in Congress with regards to help to everyday Costa Ricans who are going to be left in a very bad position, especially because once the suspension of the labor agreements start kicking in, you're going to have a lot of people that that are not going to receive their payments, so they're going to need help. Okay, so I do think that the agenda in Congress will move a lot towards that. Okay, how are we going to help these people? Okay, because it's very important to to have them with at least being able to fulfill their basic needs. Okay, because this is like a snowball effect. If we don't take care of that, then we're gonna probably have, I don't know, maybe high crime on another end. Okay, so we don't want that. So I think what we need to expect is more regulations regarding a Costa Rican version of a bailout. Okay, when I mean Costa Rican version, is because we don't have money to do a bailout, like Roberto said, like you guys know about it in the US or in Europe. So our bailout needs to come through the approving of laws that will benefit a specific groups that are in need. Okay, I continue the Congress pushing also laws towards making things more flexible for business owners and employees and employers. I'm sorry, and you know, I think, as I mentioned, we're probably going to see laws regarding moratorium on certain payments, maybe something related to leases. And I think that's what we need to expect. More things that are gonna, on one end, protect everyday Costa Ricans that are gonna be left in a bad position because cutting up jobs. And then on the other hand, a number of laws that will benefit or that will try to reactivate the economy.
It seems like this first go round of changes is targeting the employers so they can get to the employees and at least keep them working if the employer is able to do so.
That's correct.
Or at least reserve their job for them if they're completely shut down. So it's a horrible situation, quite frankly. I don't want to mince words. When you can't pay your bills, you don't want to sit still at your house. At some point in time, it becomes, all right, I'm going to go out and face this thing. I got to make some money and pay my bills or to protect my family.
Yes.
So at some point in time, they're not going to be able to keep people inside, but for so long before things happen. So it's interesting to see the measures that they're taking right now to try to get to the everyday employee through the employers.
Correct. And also there are other things that are strongly directed towards employees. For example, the government has said that they're going to pass a moratorium on certain things like electricity bills, water bills. Okay, so that at least every one of us, even if we don't pay for at least a couple of months, will not get the water or electricity shut down. Okay, so you know, I think that bearing in mind the fiscal situation of Costa Rica, the government has reacted very rapidly and actually very reasonable to a lot of sectors that are claiming for attention. So if there's one good thing to take about all of this situation is that the Costa Rican government has reacted very promptly and very responsible related to a lot of matters.
Yes, and just adding to that, and the other item that we're keeping an eye on is the credit lines from international organizations to have a bit of cash to direct to people in need. So the details of that of those are still being worked out in Congress, but we should expect more action once they have secured a line of credit or some extent of funds that they can discretionarily use for this type of situation. And the other measures that we are also expecting to benefit employees are, for example, early pension retirements or some of the mandatory saving schemes that we have. I mean, when you pay the Social Security and that what we normally call just Social Security is made up of a number of different contributions to different schemes. So they're gonna establish special regulations to allow the people in need to pull out some of that cash that they've saved while they work so that they can have something to live on the crisis. Because as you said, what's more important is get cash to those persons so that they don't have to go to other extraordinary measures to try to make a living.
Yeah. All good stuff. My big fear is this goes on too long and then crime skyrockets.
Yeah, that's what we need to avoid at all costs. And I really hope that, you know, these measures are just very, you know, initial things that the government is putting in place. I really think that we need stronger ones because I think, Rich, that should be a priority. We don't want crime to skyrocket.
I appreciate both your time. Sorry for the serious tone, but I guess this is what you guys talk about all day. Not too many jokes in there yet.
One final thing, Rich, regarding immigration, because I know that a lot of people in Nosara might have that question, is a lot of people are misinterpreting what the government said, okay? Basically, the rule is like this. Right now, we have our borders shut, only nationals and residents were allowed to come in, okay? But the government basically passed a decree saying, okay, if you're a resident and you leave the country, okay, during this period of state emergency, then it means that they say that you lose your residence condition, okay? But that doesn't mean that you lose it forever, okay? It only means that you cannot re-enter until the border is open up again for foreigners, okay?
Okay. A lot of people did misunderstand that, myself included.
No, it doesn't mean that they, that you get back to the airport and they cut your resident card in two. No, it just means
it's like
that
it took me forever to get that cedula, man.
Exactly. So it means that you need to, if you leave, then you can only re-enter until we have opened up full borders again.
Okay, it's like they left that part off of the announcement.
Yeah, that's very important. And the reason why apparently they're doing that, apparently in Nicaragua, measures are not being taken that serious. That's what at least the reports from the news are saying. So the government didn't want a big influx of Nicaraguans going back to Nicaragua through a Holy Week, and that they have legal status and then coming back in. Obviously I don't know what the measures in Nicaragua are, or if the government is right on that regards, but that basically, I think that's the reasoning behind that specific guideline that they issue. Okay, so it's important for people to know it's not that you lose your residency forever. Okay? It's just while the borders are reopened.
Okay, that's very helpful. All of this has been very helpful. Not very much fun to talk about, but it's all been very helpful.
Next time, when everything settles down, we can have a funny talk.
Yeah, man, you need to get a joke book for the next conversation. Jeez.
I can tell you a lot of Nosara stories starting 2004.
No, I don't want to hear anything that'll make me sad for a while. I've got enough on my mind. But I do appreciate everything. For the business I run, we desperately want to keep whoever we can, but at the same time, once you can't always do that when you don't have the money to pay them. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear that things are happening, and we appreciate it all. So thank you both for your time. Hopefully in the future we can have you back on a much more lighthearted discussion, and you guys can say something funny, or at least one of you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.